It makes perfect sense. Neltharion created a pact with the Void and Irenicron to counter it, embrace the light. Both of them are like twins on two sides of the same coin of the same conflict. While Earth definitely has light-ish color, light brown, Irenicron literally has light eyes when you look at him from the new cinematic. He has this light-like crystal on his forehead. The two other incarnates are using their natural spells, freezing, using fire, something you would totally expect, but Irenicron seems to be using some type of light earth spells, and if you actually listen to the sounds, it has a light-like high-pitched tone to them. His chest is being held up by straps with bright light in the middle, similar to Deathwing when he was at the peak of his madness, although that was of course the Void. So could this terrible bargain that Irenicron made be with the light? And as you may know, the light is not exactly a nice force. They can essentially take it over Altered Draenor. Zera tried to convert Illidan by force. We had seen the light invading Shadowlands in order to put them in their place. So could we be heading for the light involvement in this Ancient Dragon conflict and ultimately the setup for the light versus the Void? Before we get into the video, I want to show you guys the Grudge wallet, the perfect minimalist, sleek wallet that can fit up to 12 cards as well as cash on the side. Now, they're so confident in this wallet that it has a lifetime warranty and you can also test drive it, so if you don't like it, you can send it back. Now, recently, they started making key cases as well, which really fits in perfectly with your Grudge wallet. Now, if you use my code DORON, you can get a great discount, and make sure to just check out my link in the description as well, so rage.com/DORON and use code DORON. Now, I know this is a bit of a stretch. I purposefully didn't want to cover this initially because it was definitely kind of a far reach, but now that I've looked into this, there are like 15 different points that could literally prove this theory that Irenicron's terrible bargain was actually with the light. Now, intuitively, this makes sense. I mean, Neltharion and Irenicron are like the polar opposites, but they're actually the same, like twins on two sides of this conflict, as they're both kind of aspects of the Earth. One makes a pact with the Void and starts wielding it, and the other might start using the same exact opposite force, which is the light. And as you may know, these two forces are like the worst enemies of each other, but at the same time, they're also two sides of the same coin, like Blizzard literally said this. First of all, we have a bit of an older quote, which may or may not be relevant from the old gods, and it says, "The light has struck a bargain with the enemy of all." Now, this is obviously not in this context whatsoever. I doubt Irenicron is this enemy of all and that he's really all that important, but it just goes to show that the light is not this benevolent force that we believed in the past. In fact, all of you that have followed the lore for all this time might have realized that this change has been quite significant this past decade, and as time goes by, it becomes even more and more significant. In the past, the light was almost like this inner spirit that all of us had. If you only believed hard enough, you would fight all evil and all the dark forces would perish if you truly believed. However, then we realized that the light has been invading the Shadowlands, putting people in their place. They're jailing people that dare to interact with the Void or even question the one true path, which is of course theirs. Then the light literally enslaved the entirety of Altered Draenor, and we had inadvertently helped them in that. The Prime Naros era attempted to convert Illidan by force, so overall, as we know, the light is literally just a cosmological force looking only for itself. Sure, its interests may sometimes align with ours, in fact, quite often they do, as we're the beings of life, so naturally that we are closer to it, but life definitely seems like a predator, much like the Void. So this might explain what doesn't sit too well with people, and that is that Alexstrasza said that Irenicron made a terrible bargain, in this case, this bargain could be the light. Immediately when you think about a terrible bargain, you may be thinking a bargain with the old gods, the Void Lords, the Death Realm, just some dark, evil, like undead force. However, it's important to examine what she actually said. I mean, terrible bargain doesn't necessarily talk about him making a bargain with some terrible, evil, dark force, but it just means that Irenicron decided to embrace the war full on, the conflict, and to use whatever power was at his disposal, meaning it was now just a total war. So this terrible bargain part really refers to his deal, not necessarily the force he made the deal with. However, let's actually examine why this is a popular theory, because seriously, when you look at it this way, you might actually be completely on board with Irenicron's light deal by the end of this video. Now, all of you that can play WoW for more than a few years know what Earth Elementals look like. Generally, they're the colors of dust. They are like lightish brown with this almost a fire-like hue to them. Not necessarily as bright as the Fire Elementals, but not even that far away from them. They have this golden-like glow yellow to them, although it leans more to light brown, so this is a pretty big counterpoint to this theory. However, when you examine an Earth Elemental and Iridikron, you can notice some pretty stark differences. Objectively, the shade of his color really resembles the light more than it does an Earth Elemental. His eyes are, when you really look at them, I mean, they're like quite literally light, and even his mouth is literally almost pure light. Then he has this light crystal thing on his head, which resembles something the light army would have, so really, or really any light being would have something like this, and he doesn't only have it on his head, but on multiple parts of his armor. Now, to be objective, this light color is a bit darker. The color of this crystal does seem to resemble earth magic hue more than the light, but just the fact that it is a crystal is a very light-like feature. Another really interesting thing you could easily miss is that if you notice, he has his body held together by these leather straps, like barely held together in his core, and there is almost pure light just shining through. This really is in great contrast to when Deathwing went completely mad and he was just this being of the void, being barely held together with his scales. It's like almost he would burst at any moment in time. This Iridikron could be the exact opposite. He might have also dabbled too far into this magic, being sort of like a counter Deathwing, like end Deathwing. Now, next evidence, and the most important evidence that we have, is that he almost uses like pure light spells. You might have noticed that the other two Primal Incarnates are just super elemental in nature, which is exactly what you would expect. The one is just freezing enemies, the other is literally just using fire spells. I mean, it's super easy to notice that. It is pretty straightforward. However, Iridikron seems to be using this sort of weird mix of earth and the light. He first of all illuminates the caverns with a very light-like beam when he destroys the entrance, and then he uses this almost light-like hologram. Then when he fights enemies, these sort of seem like light spells any light caster would throw, although definitely combined with some elemental magic, it doesn't seem like just pure light because you can actually hear the earth crumbling. If you guys want a bit more evidence, just go back to the schematic and just listen really closely to the sounds of the fight. Well, you can hear a bit of earth magic when he casts some of these spells. There is like this high-pitched sound that really sounds exactly how light spells would sound from other cinematics and from the game. Another interesting point and a counterpoint we might have is, as I mentioned, that the earth has always had this light-like color to it. However, if this really was just earth magic, I mean, don't you think these spells would be more like dust or some type of an earthquake spell? Furthermore, the elementals he is fighting seem to be made of stone, like they're literally stone themselves, and he could literally just crumble them. In the cinematic, Blizzard purposefully made the other use their native abilities, so one freezes them, the other turns them into lava. So if Iridikron was an earth elemental, he would literally just crumble them, throw some sort of an earth spike, or just turn them into this immovable rock. I'd honestly expect these spells to have a dust effect or whatever else resembles the earth, but they seem almost electrical and they're a lot brighter than the earth ever was. Now, while this is quite decent evidence, realistically, this could make for an incredibly interesting plot point as well, and definitely something no one saw coming, but also, at the same time, when you think about it, this really makes perfect sense. All of us had been speculating that Iridikron's terrible bargain was with the Void Lords, the Old Gods, or even Galakrond. However, honestly, that never really made too much sense to me. I mean, he would use the exact same magic against Neltharion, but this definitely does make more sense. I mean, Iridikron realizes there is a force just as powerful that is the exact opposite to what Neltharion has been using. Both of these guys are Earth aspects, so they would have similar knowledge to what is hiding and to what power they have available to them. Furthermore, this could be an excellent setup for what is to come in the near future. At the moment, with 10.1, we have hints of cosmological void, even a cosmological being Anshul, which could introduce pure void, the Void Lords, and just planets. At the same time, it would only be natural to have the light because the light and the void are just intrinsically connected. There is also a really interesting connection how this Anshul could be the son of Azeroth that was once tied to the light, but as it was wounded, it has turned into the void, which could exactly be how Iridikron originally found out about the light as a cosmological force. Another thing I could think about is that these light-like spells could also be Azerite, although I do honestly doubt it. Azerite does have this light-like color to it with a bit of a bluish hue. However, I doubt he would just tap directly into raw Azerite that was super powerful, and honestly I wouldn't see why Deathwing wouldn't have done the same. Furthermore, this wouldn't really be a bargain that he made. I don't see how he would make a bargain with the World Soul of Azeroth. However, if this really is true, we could seriously be heading in the direction of light versus the void that has long been speculated about. Thank you for watching. Check out all these secret regions that exist in WoW but are not yet playable by clicking on the screen, and check out the Nuns Academy for videos on real world history. See you next time.